mute. Excellent. Also, I'm going to mute everybody else's phones. And Julius, what you're going to have to do when I mute everybody's phones, you're going to have to press #6 to unmute yours, because obviously as the speaker you can't be muted. So just let me mute everyone's phone.
Has muted your line.
Okay, so you should still be able to hear me, and now we need Julius to press #6. And let me know when you've done that, Julius. And
I've done it, Keely.
Oh, excellent. Good. Now, just for your purpose, what happens is when I mute all of the phones centrally, it obviously only mutes the phones that are currently logged on to the webinar. So if after we start, if we get another 50 people logged on and they're making a lot of noise, I may have to stop things in the middle and remute everybody's lines. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to unmute yourself again. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is Green Chill's December webinar. I always start off with a little bit of webinar etiquette. Webinar is being recorded, and that's especially important for this one because the proposed rule is in the comment period. So the recording is especially important. The recording will be available on the Green Chill website a couple days after I receive it. It will be under Events and Webinars. Your phones are muted. If you have to unmute them, press #6. If you look down at your the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you would see a little hand. If you need to ask a question, press that little hand button, and what happens on my screen is a little hand appears next to your name, and I can call on you, because otherwise, so many people on the webinar, we need some kind of process ask questions than just having everybody kind of yell them out as we go. I'm going to ask you, if you can, to hold your questions until the question and answer period after Julius is done explaining the proposed amendments. So if you want to, go ahead and try out your little hand. Here we have Nick's hand, Margaret's hand. There we go. Okay, so it's working. Jamie's hand. Okay. And then when you're done asking your question, you have to click on the little button again to make your hand go away. Otherwise, I think that you have another question. Okay. Important disclaimers to start off. We are focusing in this webinar on the proposed changes to the leak repair requirements. And of course, our special interest is supermarket, right? This is a Green Chill webinar. So if you're in another area, we're not necessarily going to go over, changes that affect other areas. We might, but don't rely on this to cover everything. The webinar is only meant to give a general overview of some of the amendments that might affect supermarket commercial refrigeration. And certainly time constraints don't allow us to review all of the amendments. And we definitely want you to read the amendments in their entirety. And there is a link for that, and we'll definitely post that link on Green Chill's LinkedIn group, and make sure that everybody gets that link. Okay. Any other disclaimers you want to mention?
I'll go discuss those when you hand it over.
Excellent. So I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Julius Banks. He is currently the team lead for refrigeration here in our Stratospheric Protection Division. He has been promoted and he's moving to another job. So we wanted to definitely make sure that Greenchill takes advantage of the opportunity to have him take us through these proposed amendments before he leaves. This is a great opportunity to ask the author of the amendments questions that you have. So I see there's a hand up. Jed, did you have some kind of clarifying question that you needed to ask, or did you just forget to click the button again? Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Julius, and he gets started.
All right, thanks, Keely.
Sure.
Just a couple of disclaimers to add on to what Keely had just discussed for us. We will be talking about a proposed rule at EPA that was published yesterday on 15th of December in the Federal Register. So as such, our discussion for the next 50 minutes or so really will be limited to that proposal, and even so its potential impact on commercial refrigeration, supermarket refrigeration systems. So that really will be the limitations on this discussion. For those of you who aren't familiar with the reg writing process, we are in between proposed rule and final rule, which means that anything that we discuss will be put for public consumption in what's called the Off-Air and Radiation Air Docket. And it's basically an online library for any support documents, conversations, calls, what have you, concerning the proposed rule. Said, a few things that I want to talk about before we go into particulars on the proposal.
Juliet, sorry, just a question, just to clarify so that everybody understands. That means that whatever they say on this webinar, it's being recorded and it becomes part of the official comments to these proposed amendments, right?
Well, part of the comments, it becomes a part of public record.
Oh,
so
all right.
Excuse me, will be included in the air docket, and it will be available for any university who wants to see it, read it, or hear it.
Oh, all right. Thanks.
Okay. This rule is a proposal that's been years in the making. For various reasons, it's come off of EPA's radar. But what we are attempting to do with this rule is use our Section 608 of the Clean Air Act authority to further reduce use and emissions of ozone-depleting substances used as refrigerants. And in this case, the rule amends existing regulations that are currently in place and have been in place since 1995 that deal with large commercial systems that have over 50 or more pounds of an ozone-depleting refrigerant, such as R22. The current rule and proposal, they do not address alternatives that have been found acceptable under SNAP that are non-ozone depleting. So things like 404A will not be addressed in this rulemaking. That said, the venting prohibition, the statutory venting prohibition, remains in effect. So even if EPA were to never write a regulation addressing the release of HFCs during service maintenance disposal of systems, that additional release remains illegal, and it remains that way until the time that EPA would take action to say that there's no harm to no detriment to the environment by allowing such releases. So we'll get out there. Again, the proposal is a proposed rule. It's not final. What happens is that EPA will take comment from the public, and the public can be industry, it can be other agencies, benefit groups, environmental groups, what have you. We'll take those comments. We'll address those comments either directly in the rule, in the final rule, or in an accompanying response to comments document. Comments will be addressed. They may not be addressed in an itemized format, but if we have, say, 50 comments on one issue, that one issue will be addressed. Going forward, let's talk about what it is that we are doing. commercial systems, one thing we're doing is lowering the existing leak repair trigger rate, and that's being lowered to 20%. The proposal is to lower it to 20% from the existing trigger rate of 35%. And
Julius, do you want to advance the slides?
Sorry, I just started talking, Keely. As you know, Keely more advanced with this technology than I am. This is where we are. First bullet there, we're looking at trigger rate from 35 to 20%. What that trigger rate means is, as the name implies, it's a trigger. It's not a point measure, but what you see is said, this is the expected amount of leakage that is acceptable by EPA for these systems, and that never was the case. So even when we currently have a 35% trigger rate, that's never been that was never intended to mean that we expect systems to leak at 34 or 34.9% or 35%. Nor does it mean that any equipment leaking on threshold is exempt from the other refrigerant regulatory requirements or the venting prohibition. That's an important point to make because I think it's been lost quite a bit over the years. The other things that we're doing in this proposal that we're proposing to change is to require verification and documentation of all repairs. That has not been required by owners or operators of supermarket refrigeration equipment. We have instances said it's the best, it's a very good option, it's a very good service requirement for owners of such equipment, but it's been codified in the regulations. Will be changing as a proposal. We have a requirement for the version or retrofit of what we call appliances that be sufficiently repaired. That's actually not new. What is that we are changing the time frames under which that can be done and providing some flexibility for the owners of that equipment. For example, in instances where major components aren't available, we're allowing flexibility. And we are really streaming in on record keeping requirements, particularly for determination of full charge, and a new requirement for a record what happens to all the refrigerant that's recovered. Say, for example, if you operate doors that have R22 and those doors are being converted, upgraded, remodeled, closed, whatever your case may be, over a certain amount of time, if the 22 that you have in equipment in those stores, if your decision as a corporation or as a company is to recover that refrigerant and keep it on site for other stores, there'll be a requirement to keep a record of the type and amount of that refrigerant and where it goes. If you're a contractor, take it with them. There'll be a requirement for the contractor to tell us where that refrigerant is, where they received it from, and where is it going. And the thing we're doing is adding some definitions for clarity. A new definition for seasonal variance, which we'll get into, receiver levels and what have you. Recalculation, which is always required. Retrofit retirement definitions. And what we're really hoping is to have a streamlined regulatory approach, not just for supermarket systems, but for comfort cooling chillers, for industrial process refrigeration across the board. We're hoping to have a streamlined set of regulations that apply across these varied sectors. All right. Whoever's not on mute, unless you have a question, if they could mute their line. All right, so we are proposing to lower the applicable repair trigger rates to 20%, and I think we mentioned some of this already. Require verification, repair verification. It seeks variance we've touched on. So I think most of this we've already hit upon. I'm not sure what number this is, Keely. I think we're going to slide 7. Okay, as previously discussed, the rule is just We have not yet posted it to our website, but if you visit regulations.gov and search for leak repair, or we'll give you the docket number, you can view the public online and print it or save it. The amendments are open for public comment until February 14th. As things tend to go to EPA, we tend to get the bulk of our comments up to this day. This is the case for this rule as well, but we'll have that 2-month, basically, a 2-month open comment period. As I said, after we receive comment, we will respond to those comments in finalizing the rule. I will not have a time frame for when the rule will be finalized, but we say with certainty that the comment period will close on the 14th, unless we end up with a public hearing, in which case we would extend that period. Slide I mentioned before. First of all, it's worth mentioning again, the repaired trigger rates are not an exemption to the venting prohibition, and they never have been. This rule does not apply to HFC refrigerants or to so-called natural refrigerants, CO2, ammonia, hydrocarbons. They do not apply. They apply to any blends containing HCCs. So I know that there are several blends with various in the market that have 22 in them, for example, that would apply. And we haven't changed the threshold for the charge size. We're still looking at equipment with 50 or more pound ozone depleting refrigerant. And worth mentioning, the last bullet there is that the trigger rates have never been an expectation of what equipment is leaking at, what level it's leaking at, whether it's fresh off assembly line, newly installed in the field, or whether it's 20 years old. We've never had that expectation. Certainly wasn't the intent. On the proposal, we're adding for seasonal variants, an exemption if you would like to call it that, where if you need to add refrigerant to account for ambient conditions, allowing you to do that, or the proposal would allow you to do that, if you would later have a substitution or recovery of amount of refrigerant and it's documented. We're using definitions and taking comments on those definitions. Commercial appliance was always implied but never actually codified in the regulations. We're changing the leak rate calculation, which is actually in the definition, and these definitions are found at 40 CFR 82.152. The leak calculation is currently written in the definitions, allows for 2 methods of determining the leak rate, and allows the owner of the equipment or the operator of the equipment to choose whichever method they like to, as long as they are consistent with that. There was an annualized method, or there is, I should say, an annualized method, which is a result of a 1995 lawsuit, where EPA, as part of a settlement, came up with that definition. Originally, we had a what's referred to as a rolling average method. The proposal eliminates the annualized method and go with a rolling average over a consecutive 12-month period. Amending the definition of retrofit. To clarify, we've had instances over the years where equipment across all sectors would consider a retrofit to include a change of equipment, not a change of equipment necessarily, but the use of an identical refrigerant, which was the intent and did not satisfy the conditions for an industrial process refrigeration unprepared regulations. So clarifying basically that a conversion, or a retrofit if you will, meant you were converting your equipment and that you would need to do for materials compatibility to go to a low ozone depleting potential refrigerant. And so that would mean you're going to an HFC or an alternative technology, but you have to go to a lower ozone depleting potential than what you currently have in your equipment if you chose that route. And of course, the alternatives would have to be found acceptable by EPA under Section 612 of the Act, of the Clean Act, which is SNAP, the Significant New Alternatives Policy Program. For this sector, we are proposing to require an initial and a follow-up verification. The intent originally when these rules were promulgated was to make sure that we had an initial verification once repairs were completed, immediately upon repair. For the systems, we had a requirement that didn't apply to supermarkets, that there be a follow-up verification after some had returned to normal operating conditions. And the language that stated this verification should not happen any 24 hours or business day if you want. I don't think we actually said business day, but that was certainly the intent. And no later than 30 days. And I realize that this may be a bit contentious for some folks upon first read, but just to be clear that we are not mandating an additional service call for follow-up verification. We are mandating any particular type of verification. The proposal simply says that a verification must be done and documented. We leave it to the equipment owner to decide who performs that verification, as long as they're properly certified, EPA certified technician, and the means by which they perform that verification is totally up to EPA mandating it. The proposal would be that those verifications happen and that the results of those verifications are documented, not reported to EPA, but documented. Okay, moving on. We've proposed what we call a worst leaker provision, which basically we would think is a very lenient proposal, allowing 3 weeks for any major component that failed within an consecutive 12-month period. If that component continues to fail, we are proposing that it be permanently removed. It's mentioning that some components we understand are major investments. They are not cheap. There's always been a bit of nuance in the agency's terminology and sometimes what's used in industry. The CARE Act defines appliance, and appliance is not, this is a major component. So if a condenser failure, if you have a compressor failure, they're not appliances, they are components of an appliance. We tend to think of appliance as the complete refrigerant circuitry loop. So we're looking at the exchangers, the heat exchangers, the compressors, the valves, but we are not saying that any one major component is an appliance in itself, and that's true across all sectors that we deal with, not just supermarket refrigeration. Earlier, we're allowing for flexibility. The proposal allows for some flexibility if parts or components are not available. That currently does not exist in the regulations. It's all or nothing. You repair within 30 days, or you retire or retrofit. We're proposing a ability, allowing for time frames for the mandatory repair due to trigger, exceeding the trigger rates, to freeze that 30-day clock if parts are not available, but that be documented. Under the proposal, you have to have documentation from a vendor, a manufacturer, that parts are not available and an estimated date of delivery. Once you have delivery, the time frames would pick up again. Slide 12, conversion plans in lieu of repair. This is currently what you have now under the existing regulations. The difference here is that you currently have a 12-month time frame to retrofit or convert or retire a system or a store, essentially. We are now giving 6 months if that option is taken. This is if you decide not to repair and decide that you would like to convert out of an ozone depleter or to a lower ozone depleting refrigerant. You have 6 months to complete that retrofit conversion under proposal. And it's worth mentioning that a conversion is not equivalent to a repair. EPA has never favor of converting systems that are tight, even if they are an ozone depleter. Systems that are tight that do not emit refrigerants are not an issue, would not be an issue. We've been in favor of converting without repairing. Many, as the Green Shield members know, many of the alternatives have global warming potentials. EPA not in favor of any conversion out of an ozone-depleting substance to an HFC or an HFC blend without repairing those systems first. It's a very good environmental story, and it's certainly not something that we would like to see happen. Just commentary. Nothing. It's not in the proposal. Just my commentary there. Minute this, but it's worth looking over again. Down, just save some time to the last bullet. We still hear this from some owners of systems that we repair all the time. That's really not a very good environmental scenario. What the regulations are aimed at doing is breaking that cycle of we leak, we repair, we recharge. Next month, we leak, we repair, we recharge, and again the next month. That's really what these regulations are aimed at stopping behavior of making sure, trying to make sure that we have adequate repairs the first time, certainly if not then the second time, and that those repairs are documented and verified in hopes that you don't have that complete, that cycle be repeated. Of contention, again, my commentary. This isn't just supermarket refrigeration equipment owners, it's across the board. We continue to hear this still, that we don't rate a leak rate because we know we repair. And it goes back to the story I just said. Yeah, well, we repaired this week, and we repaired last month, and we repaired the month before that. Really haven't mandated that you perform the leak rate calculation, but there would be no way of knowing if you're in compliance without determining leak rate, without performing that calculation. Everything in the regulations is currently written and again is proposed. Everything is dependent upon the refrigerant. That's when the trigger starts. That's when the calculation starts. That's performed, you have no way of knowing you're in compliance. You would have absolutely no way. So this isn't anything new, but it's again worth mentioning that we would hope and expect that leak rate being calculated upon addition of refrigerant. We'll surprisingly continue to hear the sub-bullet that the onus is on the contractor. The onus is on the onus of repair, that is on my contractor. It's on the software company that use. It's not. The onus has always been on the equipment owner or operator. It's never been on a contractor. We understand that contractors have an important role to play, and they have their sets of regulations that they have to comply with, the refrigerant regulations within EPA. But for the service, the documentation, the service, the verification of systems that you own or operate as a supermarket are yours and yours alone. I do see questions in the side in the chat, and I will get to those a few more. I think we have about 4 more slides.
Julius, there we go. When we enter the question and answer session, I'm going to take hands, and I'll take the questions from the chat. So I'll worry about that, and I'll give the questions to you, and then you can concentrate on the answers, and I'll kind of run the logistics for questions here in the background. Okay.
All right, thanks. Well, this is an overview. It's not in depth. What I've said isn't new. I'm happy to go over questions with Lee kind of moderating that. Again, remember the questions will be limited to the proposal as it applies to commercial refrigeration only. Issues we'll deal with at another date or offline. But I think we have about a half hour, which is about 10 minutes more than I thought we'd have. So I went through that kind of quickly. So
okay.
We'll open it up to Keely for questions.
I think some of the questions are going to tease out some of the details a little more. So I'll kick things off here with a good question from the chat. Again, if you want to ask a question on the phone, click on that little hand, and let me know that you've got a question, and I'll kind of put you in the question queue. So we have one here that says, when using the rolling average leak calculation, can you exclude the amount of refrigerants added for refrigerant conversions or system additions?
Keely, if I can read that, I'm not quite sure that I understand what that means, to be honest.
No, it was just to me. So so I guess it says that if you've added refrigerant, and you would do, if that were a leak, you would do your rolling average leak calculation. But I guess what they're saying is, obviously you add refrigerant when you do a conversion, a retrofit, or obviously like if you add additional capacity onto your refrigeration system, you're going to add additional charge. So if you're adding for, a refrigerant retrofit or a system addition, that addition of refrigerant does not get included in your rolling average leak rate, right?
Well, it's not intended to, especially for a conversion then triggered by a leak, but that would be the perfect type of comment to send the agency. Things aren't specifically, or you feel aren't specifically addressed in what we call the preamble to the reg text, which is that FR notice, that Federal Register notice. That's exactly something that you should submit to obtain clarity from the agency, or written clarity during that comment period. So I'm going to punt to some degree on that one. I guess the first half of it was for retrofit, and what was the other issue? I thought it was
retrofit, and you're adding, you expanded the size of the store, and you've doubled your meat and seafood section, and you've added another rack, right? So you've expanded your refrigeration system. Obviously, you have to add additional charge. That also is not a leak.
That's not a leak and not covered. Scenario you just described, it wouldn't be a leak. By that, like so something that's not specifically, I'd place that in the same category. It's not specifically addressed in the proposal, and if further clarity would be requested, something that should be commented on, and so that respond publicly.
Okay, and just for Green Chill partners, we had a special roundtable discussion yesterday on these amendments, and also our quarterly partner meeting for the first quarter of next year is going to be a section of it is going to be devoted to me teaching you how to go online and demonstrating how to go online and how to submit comments. This is part of democracy. The regulatory process and rule writing process is meant for the public to have the right to, and I would greatly encourage you to help us design the best rule possible by giving us your comments about whatever you feel is not clear, or anything else you want to say about it. So for Green Chill partners, I'm going to be taking you through that. I see Pete K has his hand up. Go ahead, Pete.
One issue, hold on, before Pete starts, Keely. That word should not only be for Green Chill members. We will, the document itself is very clear on how to comment, and if anyone has any questions or issues with providing public comment, Green Chill members or otherwise, contact us. We'd be happy to help you through that process.
Go ahead, Pete. I muted everybody. You probably have to hit #6 because if you're talking, we can't hear you. Pete? Okay, I'm gonna move on to somebody else. Pete.
Hello.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. This is Pete.
Go ahead, ask your question.
Okay. All right. A question regarding this ruling, the EPA ruling, and we also in California have a Air Resources Board ruling, which is very sort of this. Is it the exact same legislation that's just nationwide, or is it less stringent than the Air Resources Board ruling in California, or how many because in California, apparently we have to comply with this ruling, with the ruling 95380.
My would be to contact Air Resources Board for any questions you have concerning the requirements for their regulation. We certainly can address their requirements. The proposal that we have is a proposal to amend existing federal regulations that apply across the country, the U.S., and all territories, and it's been in effect since 1995.
It's like the same solution, basically. It's just the same requirements for leak testing and record keeping. Also, they have some, I didn't the beginning of this, but they also have requirements for registering with their resources board and paying a yearly fee.
Okay, we don't want to be spending time talking about what California requires in the Air Resources Board. Let's stick to the Section 608 federal leak repair regulations and take questions on that.
Okay, I just I was just trying to find out whether this was related to this or the same or not. And apparently,
that's
that
a
answer
state
that was my question.
Yeah, and this federal, this applies to every state.
Okay.
Julius, I would like to push for clarity on line purging that is required when charging a system to prevent the introduction of non-condensables into a system.
There is a section in the preamble, and I don't have a page number, but you could just search on it dealing with purging. We currently have an exemption, if you want to call it that, in the existing regulations for purging if the equipment is equipped with purging device. I'm aware of any that exist, so we'll leave the discussion to the text, and if you need additional clarity beyond what's in that text, then again, you should comment in writing.
There's also a follow-up here. It says, Keeley, to be clear, the current practice in commercial refrigeration requires line purging, and this practice goes against the letter of the law here. It is important to clarity on this. So
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
We recognize that purging is something that happens in all of these sectors, and that is why we addressed it in the proposal.
Okay.
Basically, the proposal says that those don't count against a leak rate if you have a purge collection device, just layman's terms, my terms. And if that doesn't seem adequate, or if there are additional questions on that, then feel free to comment.
I have another one here. It says, please clarify the rule of follow-up leak check in not less than 24 hours. So just go over that again.
Okay.
So in other words,
right now,
go ahead.
I can try to go back to that slide. Give me a second here. This not requiring a follow verification for systems. We think it's a very good practice. We think that doing so reduces emissions. Paul is saying after the work is completed, you'll have to do an initial verification on that those repairs held. That can be done immediately, so choose. There's a second verification requirement that's being proposed, so that there would be two verifications. The verification would have to happen after that system has operated under normal operating conditions for at least 24 hours. What I attempted to clarify was that EPA has not dictated, we don't dictate, and we're not proposing to dictate any specific type of verification. Types of verification, and that's being left to the equipment owner or operator. What we're proposing to mandate is that those verifications happen and that the documentation on how the verification was performed and what the results were are maintained on site with that equipment. The proposal does. It's not stating that you need to have an additional service call for that verification. It's really up to the owner. If they choose to do that, certainly they could do that and comply with the proposal. But it's their choice as long as both verifications are done, results and dates and types of those verifications are documented and maintained.
So in words, pick how you want to verify each leak repair, no sooner than 24 hours, and document it.
There are two verifications. There's one that would happen after repair is done, immediately after, and another one after 24 hours. I'm not sure if I can be more clear. I'm sorry.
Okay.
How it's proposed.
The Federal Register notice yesterday suggested EPA is looking at 6 different leak rate reductions, not specifically 20%. Why is there a difference?
What we typically try to do in many proposed rules is to give public insight to thinking, and we will, in case we discuss and list other options that we considered. That's there. So, or just to make kind of succinct, is that percent isn't the only option we looked at. We have other options. This is our preferred option. It doesn't mean it's where we'll end up being final. It just means that this is our preferred option at this time. Based on information we get, documentation, studies, comments, we made it so with one of the other options. But for right now, in the proposal, this is preferred.
So you have particular comments that you think that 20% is too low. We want to hear them. If you think 20% is too high, we want to hear them. That's the perfect type of information to submit as a comment on the proposal. So,
in the preamble, Keely, we actually say, and kind of as saying earlier about the trigger rate not being an expected leak rate. The way we ask for comment is to say we're proposing to lower this trigger rate, and we'd like to know. We are asking for comment. The reason that an owner of this equipment could not attempt repair and buy those repairs within 30 days if they go above that trigger. That's the request for comment is. It's not be arbitrary in that I don't like 20% or suggesting that 20% is where our equipment leaks. That's not the case. We're asking comment that if you see that trigger, is there any reason that you would not be able to attempt to repair and verify and keep records of those actions? That's actually the type of comment we're asking for.
Okay. This is interesting. Are natural disasters, for example, a lightning strike, considered or measured differently from normal leaks or needed repairs?
We do have any exemption for catastrophic events, and I can say over the years that catastrophe means different things to different people, and it seems like every leak event is a catastrophe in some case. But the answer to the question is we have not provided any type of an exemption for act of God, let's say.
Okay. If no refrigerant is added or removed, but the components are changed or inspected, must records on this be maintained in the documentation?
The records are contingent upon addition of refrigerant, that's an ozone depleting refrigerant. So you are not involved in anything dealing with addition of refrigerant, this part of the regulations wouldn't apply. Other portions would apply, which is, again, why I keep stressing that the leak repair requirements are only a portion of the requirements under 608. It would not exempt you from other portions of the regulation. So it could that you need certified technicians to install those components. It could very well be that you need to use EPA refrigerant recovery equipment so that you don't release refrigerant during that service.
Okay. Serge, from Super Value, you have your hand up. You want to ask a question?
I'm just curious as to why Julius thinks that the inspection second verification test not sooner than 24 hours doesn't require a second service call.
It wouldn't. Said that the agency is not mandating that it does. If you have a scenario where you have in-house personnel, and I should clarify that we're not mandating that you have to hire any particular company to come out and do a second call. The only requirement for the verification is done by a properly EPA certified technician. So, in clarifying my statement, we're not dictated it has to be someone who's not an employee of your organization, or that it has to be a contractor, or that it has to be done at the 25th hour. And again, that's a proposal, so it's not final. If you believe that, and I guess we'll add this other caveat to it, we've also added the amount of public burden that would involve, and we've included the most conservative, what we think would be the most conservative requirement. You would have an outside contractor come in and perform that service. If you feel that the agency's estimates are on or too low or too high, that's something that we'll take comment on, consider. Or if you think that have follow-up verification will have the intended result in the proposal.
Well, I believe that it does, but we do it within when we make the repair. Because it's very specific in the regulation that the initial verification test has to be done before you recharge the system. So, that's done in a standing vacuum. When the mechanic makes his repair, he removes any air or other contaminants from the system, pulls the vacuum on the circuit that was repaired, makes sure the vacuum holds, recharges the system, and our own internal requirement is that the mechanic then goes back after he does his paperwork, puts his tools away, when the system's down to normal temperatures and pressures, or up to normal temperatures and pressures if it's a high side instance. Then he's back and verifies either chronically or soap bubbles that the repair that he made still holds. So we see a value in that, and we require contractors to do it. But to go by the store trip 24 hours later or to 30 days later is going to involve increasing service costs, probably about 30%. It's also if it involves a refrigerated case in the supermarket, that's also going to be another inconvenience for the store because now they have to pull the product back out of the case again after they've just restocked it. So then you've got the labor at the store. I mean, it's just, ask yourself, how much do you want to pay for groceries,
Yeah. At that point, I hope that you would write comments and submit those to the agency, and that you make them as clear to understand as what you just stated.
Okay.
Great. Very good points. Let me see. So, if no, I asked that one. Can the required records for leak documentation be kept at a store in soft copy format, accessible by the store operator? I don't know what soft copy format is. I guess he means electronically.
Never promoted or been in favor of any particular software. I know I stated at conferences that you would have to make up their own minds, their own decision, but they're not a requirement to do so. The requirement is that those records be available upon request, and that it means just that, if they need to be available upon request.
All But Julius, that's where you. I know we were talking yesterday about that, and you said, what you don't. It's fine to have your records electronically, but you
we'll
don't.
leave it.
Okay.
We should leave it there. The
All
records, we're not mandating any particular software system, and we're actually silent on that. And the requirement is that those records be available. So we'd expect records to be made readily available.
Okay. What is an acceptable second verification short of a second service call?
I think we've kind of beat that one around a bit. We're expecting, or as proposed, we have a proposal that would require a second verification on repairs. It's been described, and if anything in that proposal is not clear, or no clarification is requested, we would everyone or anyone who has that type of issue respond to the agency, respond to the proposal.
Okay. Carl Cohn, I guess the last name is. You have your hand up. Want to go ask a question?
I'm confused about recording refrigerant drums. Is there a separate mandate to keep record of drum purchase and empty, and when they were emptied and where they were used, in addition to the leak repair records?
Yeah, I'm not sure which ozone depleting refrigerant you would be using that would, for refrigeration, that would be in a drum, but
well, your drum numbers,
no, we don't. There is a requirement that you keep a record of the amount of refrigerant purchased, and there are records that these leak repair regulations don't address, but nothing just described.
Software uses drum numbers.
And again, I'm not going to be flippant with you, but EPA has not developed a software. So we have software issues that suggest you have discussions with the developer of your software.
So EPA does not require recording of drums. Is that right?
Section 608 regulations do not have a requirement for drum identification. Okay. Again, would say you need to speak to your developer to see what thinking they're flying with. Maybe there's another regulation. Maybe it's federal, maybe it's EPA, maybe it's state, local. We can address software issues because we don't know them. We don't. Well, it's a software question, and we address software questions.
I'm just wondering if the EPA requires it. Is all I'm asking.
It sounds like the answer is no.
Is no, correct.
For our regulations, the answer is no. For the regulations that are being proposed and discussed, there's no such requirement that exists. But you can keep a record of refrigerants purchased.
Okay.
That's changed.
All right. Okay. I'm going to move on from the purge question. Everything Julius could say about that has been said. Okay, as required verification and documentation of all repairs is only refrigerant repairs or any repair. I think you answered this too, but it didn't come through the first time, so. In other words, the proposed amendment, the repair, what we're talking about, it's set off by the addition of refrigerant, right? If there's a repair that doesn't require the addition of refrigerant,
more I could say to that, Keely. The leak repair requirements all contingent upon addition of refrigerant, but that doesn't mean that you're exempt from the other regulations, and there are other regulations that would address that scenario. So we're limiting discussion to the proposal as it applies to supermarket refrigeration systems, and those leak repair regulations trigger until you've added refrigerant and leading refrigerant. So I don't know what more I can say on that.
Sometimes it's just, people can come off, or agencies, they come back. Sometimes it's just a question of repeating that. So
I understand. I understand.
So Pete, you have your hand up. I don't know if that's again or if you didn't put it down the first time. Do you want to ask another question?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. You have to click on the hand again to make it go away. I know that's irritating, but the system doesn't know when you've asked your question.
I'm trying it. It won't. So I'm not sure what.
All right. Well, I'll just ignore it then. Yeah. I'm just going through here. I think we covered all of the questions I was sent here through the chat function, and I think I've got all the hands. Okay. If you did send me something by chat and I missed it, it's because I have a really long list here. I tried to make sure I didn't miss any. So if you submit a question by chat and I didn't get it, please raise your hand now and speak up. We have another couple of minutes, so okay, Randy McAdam. Randy there? Randy, you have to press #6.
Am I?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I just wondered, Julius, if you'd spend just a couple minutes expand the discussion on the 3 strikes rule. As for what I understand it, if you have a chronic leaker, you expect that if we have 3 events within a year, then we should consider replacing it. But how it pertains to large systems? I think you talked to it, but it wasn't quite clear on your answer. I wanted to try that again. On multiplex rack system, it's in different spots sometimes. Is that considered strikes if it leaks in different spots?
Proposal is written if a component of your system has 3 leak events at the component level, 3 leak events in a consecutive 12-month period, then that component needs to be replaced. And it's currently what we have in the proposed rule. That's not a requirement.
So it's component-based, not system-based.
One big component is an evaporative condenser example that we use. And it's in different spots in that evaporative condenser. Is that considered 3 strikes then?
It's the same component that has multiple leaks in that consecutive 12-month period, then the proposal would capture it and it would have to be replaced.
All right, thank you.
Okay. If you think that's not clear, or you think further clarification needs to be written into the proposal specifically about that situation, feel free to comment. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. Yes, we usually do a call.
Okay.
It says here I have one that came in. Does that mean it's a follow-up to the last one? So the 3 strikes rule. So does it mean that leaks will have to be recorded on component level?
As written, we would expect to have a record of where the leak was and what was done to repair the leak. Even of the 3 strikes, how would you know what to address? I don't know.
Okay. okay, this is a chance for me to answer a question. Give Julius's voice a break. I got this from a couple of people, and I was answering it individually. Who is going to enforce the requirements? There's some confusion, people thinking that the State Department, the State DEQ is going to enforce this. This is something that obviously isn't changing. It's a federal regulation from, federal agency, the EPA. EPA has regions throughout the United States, and your state agencies are not the people who are going to enforce this. It's going to be your EPA region, and have a headquarters enforcement office too that cooperates on that. So federal regulation is enforced by the feds. Anything to that, Julius?
We'll say it. It's repeating that this is an amendment. It's a proposed amendment to an existing federal regulation. This is not a state regulation. This is not a local government requirement. This is the federal U.S. Environmental Protection Agency regulation, amendment to an existing regulation. I think that's worth stating if there's still confusion out there.
Okay. All right, so we're at 2 o'clock. Thank you very, very much to our speaker, Julius. We of course all wish you the best of luck, all the best in your upcoming new job. Thank you for taking the time for all of us to answer questions on this before you move on. Again, to repeat, I got an awful lot of questions about, can people have copies of the slides, etc. This is all going to be up on Green Chill's website in a couple days under and webinars. And I also post all of this kind of stuff on Green Chill's LinkedIn group. So I encourage you, if you do not belong to Green Chill's LinkedIn group, that's the way that I stay in contact and let the public know about interesting things going on with Green Chill. So I encourage everybody to sign up for that. Instructions are on EPA on Green Chill's homepage in the little new box. So it's easy to do, and I think you get a lot of valuable information. So thank you everyone for attending.
Keely, and before you close,
yes.
One more comment. And the comments for those who weren't on at the beginning of the call. The slides, as well as any information that we would put on Green Chill, will also be available to the general public through the regular.gov docket system. So they'll be available to anyone and everyone, whether they're Green Chill members on this call or are not on this call. And also the invitation to help with comments. If there are any questions concerning how to respond, feel free to contact any of us at EPA, and we will help you through that process. Again, that is not contingent upon you being a Green Chill member, and it's all that you were on this call to receive that assistance. Simply call or email us. And thank you all for your attention, and thank you, Keely, for organizing.
Oh, excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a good rest of the day. And if I don't talk to you before the holidays, towards the end of December, have a happy holiday too.